Hola amigos de mi Arrecife, nos encontramos en el stand de Tropic Marine, una empresa que no necesita ninguna presentación, una de las empresas con mayor tradición, mayor confiabilidad en la industria de la acuariofilia marina. Sus productos son usados por universidades, en acuarios públicos y por supuesto en nuestros hogares. Tienen un tremendo departamento de investigación y desarrollo, al punto que muchos de sus productos siempre son copiados por la competencia o requieren de licencias que negocian con Tropic Marine. Hoy nos acompaña Lu, que es el gerente de Tropic Marine para los Estados Unidos. Lu no habla español, habla poquito como él dice, pero vamos a hacer la entrevista en inglés. Ustedes van a encontrar en subtítulos toda la información que Lu nos va a regalar. Lu, how are you?
Okay. Lo siento, es más fácil para mí en inglés, okay?
No hay problema, Lu. Lu, which is the history behind the name of Tropic Marine?
Oh, I don't know the history behind the actual name Tropic Marin, but the company has been around for over 50 years. Dr. Hans Biener was the first guy, well, there's some debate whether he was the first or one of the first guys, to look at the ocean and to say, we can reproduce this chemical makeup in a laboratory so that we can make it very, very clean and something that could be used in reef tanks.
Lu, some of the star products of Tropic Marine are the salts, all the more old products that we will receive from Tropic Marine. Why are so important these salts for our hobby, which is the test that they do in Germany with to provide that quality that we receive?
Well, one of the big factors is that Tropic Marin uses pharmaceutical grade raw materials to make the products. The reason that's important is because when pharmaceutical grade materials are used, you have insurance that there are no contaminants. There's no surprise as to what's in the product. Really, the main difference between salts that are slightly more expensive and salts that are slightly less expensive is the grade of the raw material that's used. Because if the raw material is refined, so it's more pure, it's more expensive. And this makes the product then cost a little bit more. But with a reef tank, it's very, very important because if we introduce contaminants like phosphates or nitrates or silicates or heavy metals to a reef tank, now we can lose animals that are very expensive and very sensitive. In a fish-only tank, it's not as much of an issue. But in a reef tank, it's really very important to have the product be that pure. Most companies don't bother to use pharmaceutical grade, but Tropic Marin has a history in Germany in the human pharmaceutical business, and that's why we use pharmaceutical grade raw materials.
Okay, great. We can find salt with probiotics, the symbiotics, regular salt, Reef Pro, and all these salts have different alkalinity.
They don't have all different alkalinities, but they're all used for a little different type of application. It depends on how the aquarist likes to run his tank. So Tropic Marin makes 4 salts. We make the classic salt, the Pro Reef.
For fish-only tanks.
Well, in Europe, and I think also in South America, it's very much considered a salt for fish-only tanks. Here in the US, there are a lot of people that use the classic salt for reef tanks where they like to keep a slightly higher alkalinity. So for me, it's not a fish-only salt. It is the one salt from Tropic Marin that I would use if I had a fish-only tank. But if I had a tank was a reef tank that I wanted to keep a higher alkalinity, I would use the classic salt.
Okay, we are talking about around 12, 13?
No, not that high.
Okay.
9 to 10.
9 to 10.
Yeah.
Okay.
Natural, you have to remember, natural seawater is 6.5 DKH. And so if you're talking 12 DKH, or this is close to twice what natural seawater is. So 9 to 10 DKH is about as high as we want to go.
In the market, we can find salt with that DKH.
You can, but it's kind of interesting. You can break the companies up that make these kinds of products. You can break them up into two categories. One category says that a reef tank is a small closed system. And because it's a small closed system, we need to do things very differently than the way it's done in the ocean, okay? These are the companies that would give you 12 DKH, okay? They say higher alkalinity, higher calcium causes faster growth. But in fact, to my knowledge, the research shows that when you get that faster growth, you also get growth that is not natural. It's more brittle. It doesn't have the right components to it. The shape of the corals is not the same. So corals have been growing for hundreds of thousands of years in the ocean, taking over many square miles of the ocean. We humans have messed this up in the last 100 years, but before that, for hundreds of thousands of years, corals have grown very fine in the ocean. So we like to take our lessons from the ocean. So the other category of companies say, even though this is a small system and it's closed, we still need to try to do this the way it's done in the ocean. And this is the Tropic Marin way. Okay. So we try to take our lessons from the ocean. If the ocean is 6.5 or 7 DKH, we would prefer not to be 12. We would prefer to be maybe 7 or 8 would be better.
Okay. With Classic, we get 9 to 10 DKH.
Yes.
The second salt is Pro.
Pro Reef. Okay. And in the Pro Reef, you have now 7 to 8 DKH. Now, we go back to the Classic for a minute. You either have high calcium or high alkalinity. Mm-hmm. You can't have both because it precipitates. Mm-hmm. So with the alkalinity up in the 9 to 10 range, we can only put about 380 parts per million of calcium in the Classic salt. But in the Pro Reef salt, where we drop the alkalinity to 7 to 8, now we can raise the alkalinity, the calcium, up to 420 or 440. Okay? This is not the reason that Pro Reef exists. Pro Reef exists because of the lower alkalinity. But because we did lower the alkalinity, made sense to put in some more calcium and magnesium if we could.
Sure. Okay, then we have the same biotic.
Next is a bioactive system.
Bioactive. Okay.
Bioactive system. So if we start with the Pro Reef salt and we add 1 degree of alkalinity, so instead of 7 to 8, now we have 8 to 9. Mm-hmm. And then we also add a product that we make, which is our first carbon dosing product. This product is called Reef Active. Mm-hmm. So we literally take the Pro Reef salt and we add the Reef Active to it.
To get more bacteria.
It's the Reef Active is not actually bacteria. The Reef Active is the food. Yes, exactly. It's carbon dosing. Yeah. So now when you're doing the water change, you're automatically doing a low level of carbon dosing every time you do the water change. You get all of the advantages of carbon dosing without any of the danger of overdosing.
Right. Fantastic.
Then above the bioactive system, now we have the symbiotic salt. So in the bioactive system salt, where we have the Reef Active is enhancing the health of the invertebrates. Mm-hmm. Then in the symbiotic salt, now we add the probiotic compounds for the fish, for the vertebrates. So you're helping both the invertebrates and the vertebrates. And because we have dormant bacteria in there with the probiotics, we're also adding dormant nitrifying, denitrifying, and purple bacteria. Okay. The purple bacteria is very important because this purple bacteria is what metabolizes the hydrogen sulfide that is produced from anaerobic bacteria, which is very toxic. The purple bacteria metabolizes that into sulfur and sulfate, which is much less toxic. Okay. So this is really the symbiotic salt. To me, is the best salt in the world for starting an aquarium because you have everything in there that you need to get that aquarium started.
Ok, perfecto. Ahora vamos a preguntarle a Lu, ya que hablamos de la sal, que es fundamental para nuestros acuarios, otra parte que es muy importante, la alcalinidad, el calcio y por supuesto también el consumo de magnesio, que ya nos hablaba Lu que viene en la sal, pero en muchas ocasiones por la demanda que tenemos en nuestros acuarios requerimos de algo adicional. Lu, can you explain us the Balling method, the Balling system?
Absolutely. So Hans Werner Balling first wrote about the Balling method in 1994, and then he made a small revision in Germany in 1996. Ever since 1996, it's been one of the most popular ways in Europe to add alkalinity and calcium to reef tanks. In 2001, Tropic Marin hired Hans Werner Balling, and he is now the head of our product development. And so I learned everything I know about the Balling method from the guy that made the Balling method, Hans Werner Balling. So in the Balling method, you have three parts. You have the part A, the part B, and the part C. Part A is calcium chloride. Part B is sodium bicarbonate. And the part C is sodium chloride-free sea salt. This is everything that's in sea salt, but no sodium chloride. So all 70 trace elements and magnesium and potassium, strontium, molybdenum, everything that's in sea salt, but no sodium chloride.
Normally, when people refer to part C in other brands, they are referring to magnesium only.
This is a slightly difficult thing to understand. So I'll do my best to explain it, but then maybe you can re-explain it. Part C of the Balling method does have magnesium in it. In fact, the most of what's in part C is magnesium, and then all 70 trace elements. But there's a very important distinction to be made. The Balling method does not supplement magnesium. The part C adds magnesium to the tank, but it doesn't supplement magnesium. The difference being that I do put magnesium in the tank, but I'm not making up for the magnesium that is used. Let me explain. When you add the part A and the B, the calcium chloride and the sodium bicarbonate, the animals use the calcium from the calcium chloride, leaving the chloride. They use the carbonates from the sodium bicarbonate, leaving the sodium. So now you have the sodium and the chloride. All right. And they then come together to make sodium chloride, salt. Okay. The problem with leaving it at that, like the two-part method does, is that now you're increasing the level of sodium chloride in the tank. This makes the salinity go up, and when the salinity goes up, we have to add now fresh water. And when we dilute the sodium chloride, we're also diluting the other 30%. So I do like this. I use my hands. It's the only way I can do it. People understand. My hands. I wish I spoke Spanish well enough to do this in Spanish. You have a lot of translation to do when I'm done. Okay, so if this is an imaginary line of salinity 1.025,
Okay.
this is made up in good natural seawater of 70% sodium chloride and 30% other stuff. Magnesium, strontium, potassium, molybdenum, all of that other stuff. 70, 30, 1.025. Now, if we add a bunch of sodium chloride, this raises the salinity. And when we put in the fresh water, we dilute everything. We don't just dilute the sodium chloride, we dilute everything. So, still we have 1.025, but it's not 70-30 anymore. Now it's like 80-20. And if we add more sodium chloride, now it's 85-15. And as we continue to add two-part, we make more sodium chloride and less of everything else.
Okay, I see. That's
Okay.
the great, the fantastic idea of Balling.
So what the Balling method does is to add also the other 30%. So instead of... Yes. So the salinity still goes up. But instead of going up like this and getting diluted and going up and getting diluted like this, the salinity goes up like this because we're adding both. And then when we dilute it, we come back down right where we started. This is the beauty of the Balling method. We do away with this ionic imbalance, and we keep an ionically balanced system.
Okay. It's so fantastic, the idea of Balling method, that other brands are doing copies.
Yes, but there is no company in the world that makes Hans Werner Balling's formula. And most of the companies do a B, and then they add magnesium.
Light Balling.
Yeah, that's all nothing to do with Balling. All the Balling stuff. If you want to use the Balling method, you have to get Tropic Marin, because Tropic Marin, Balling is the only Balling salts made under the direct supervision of Hans Werner Balling.
We have another products to talk about, Lou.
Yes.
Which product do you want to show us?
I'd like to show you Carbo Calcium.
Okay.
Yes. So this is the powder. This also comes as a liquid.
Okay.
And you can add the powder directly, but really the best way is to use the powder to mix with RODI water to make the liquid. Okay? So, this is, I've been now with Tropic Marin for 22 years. In all the years I've been with them, this is the favorite product I've ever seen them make.
Okay.
So, this is a single solution that doses both calcium and alkalinity.
Okay.
Okay? And there's no sodium chloride produced. So the salinity doesn't go up. There's no ionic imbalance. There's no change in the pH. All you're doing when you're adding this is adding calcium and alkalinity in one solution.
Fantastic.
It's amazing.
Amazing. Yeah.
It's a lot of people, they when I explain this to them, they say, how is this possible? It's not possible to do that. It is possible. Because this is an organic form of calcium that when the calcium goes into solution, the organic substances are metabolized then into the bicarbonates, the carbonates. And so you add both the calcium and the alkalinity in one solution. It's fantastic.
Great idea.
And no raise in the salinity. Now, this is not better or worse than the Balling method. The Balling method has an advantage over this. And this has an advantage over the Balling method also. Every way has its advantages and disadvantages. So, in the Balling method, the advantage of the Balling method is that you have A for calcium, B for alkalinity. So, if your tank uses a little bit more alkalinity, let's say you're adding 50 milliliters a day of A, B, and C. The goal with Balling is to use equal amounts, okay?
But you explained me that we can have more alkalinity if we need it.
Yes, if your tank uses more alkalinity and you're adding 50 milliliters of each and you see the alkalinity is dropping a little bit, you could add 60 milliliters of a B. So now you're adding 50 of A, 60 of B, and 50 of C. And this maintains the ionic balance and gives you that little extra. So one of the big advantages of the Balling method is that you can make that little adjustment, okay? You lose that here because it's a single solution. You have no ability to adjust.
Yes.
So if you notice that this is holding the calcium, but the alkalinity is dropping a little bit, then you have to add a little bit of the liquid buffer to bring the alkalinity back up again.
Okay, great.
It's better though, even better than the liquid buffer. If you are using Carbo Calcium, this is really interesting. If you could use this to raise the alkalinity, but if you're using Carbo Calcium and you're maintaining the calcium level with the Carbo Calcium, but the alkalinity is dropping a little bit, the best thing is to get some Balling B and add a little Balling B to add a little extra alkalinity.
Okay.
It also gives you the ability, if this is holding your alkalinity, but your calcium is dropping a little bit, you get a little Balling A and you add a little extra Balling A.
Okay, great.
So it's very easy to adjust. So the advantage of the Balling method is you can make that adjustment. The disadvantage is you need 3 dosing liquids. The advantage of the Carbo Calcium is only 1 liquid, the disadvantages. Maybe sometimes you need a little bit of shot of something else.
Okay. Okay, I have a couple questions. Normalmente nos hemos encontrado que a veces nos es difícil bajar los nitratos, bajar el fosfato y se presenta también el caso contrario. Muchas personas requieren de subir los nitratos o subir los fosfatos porque su sistema los consume muy rápidamente. Lou, what kind of product have a Tropic Marine to lower the phosphates or lower the nitrates in one case? And there is another case that people have to add nitrates because they are in zero. What kind of product offer Tropic Marine for those cases?
So what we're talking about now is carbon dosing. And when you carbon dose, I want to make an important distinction on carbon dosing because everybody says, oh, we're going to carbon dose to lower the phosphates and nitrates. It's not really the reason we carbon dose. Lowering the phosphates and nitrates is, in my opinion, a benefit that you get when you carbon dose, but it's not the reason to carbon dose. The reason to carbon dose is to create very, very nutritious food for your corals.
Yes.
Okay? And then, as a byproduct of this,
Correct.
we lower the phosphates and nitrates. So we have a number of products that do carbon dosing. Reef Active in the little bottle. Yeah, this one. So this is Reef Active. This is the first of our carbon dosing products. I really love this product. This is the product that we add to ProReef to make bioactive system salt, this powder. What I like about this type of carbon dosing is that it is not an acid carbon dosing like vinegar or vodka.
Sure.
This is the polymers here are long chain marine polymers from seaweed. So this is a very natural way of carbon dosing. Very low risk. It's very hard to overdose this. You get all of the benefits of the carbon dosing without any. The big danger in carbon dosing is overdosing. So this is one way of carbon dosing, and it's a very low risk way of doing it. Okay. Now we also have Elima NP, which is in that little bottle in the back there in the little box. Yes. So this is a little bit more like vinegar or vodka carbon dosing. But vinegar and vodka is not my favorite way to carbon dose. I prefer to do with slightly more natural, but this is more similar to that. This you have to be a little bit more careful with the dosing. It's more powerful of a type of carbon dosing than the Reef Active. Okay, now, when someone wants to carbon dose and they're coming from an ultra low nutrient system, the animals that we are trying to grow with all kinds of carbon dosing need phosphates and nitrates to eat. And in an ultra low nutrient system, they have no phosphates and nitrates. So we have a product called Plus NP, which is a carbon dosing product that actually adds nitrates and phosphates to the system so that you can grow this beneficial bacteria. Because if you have an ultra low nutrient system and you detect no nitrates and no phosphates, this is not good either. There should be about a 10-to-1 ratio.
Okay.
10-to-1 of...
You are talking about Redfield ratio?
It's related to Redfield ratio.
Okay.
I think it's different, but it's to phosphates to nitrates or nitrates to phosphates? I forget.
Redfield is carbons, nitrates, and phosphates. 106 carbons,
Yeah.
16 nitrates, and 1 phosphate.
Yeah. So it's you want to run about 10-to-1 ratio of nitrates to phosphates. Okay. And in many tanks, there are nutrients, but they're in the wrong concentrations. So we make a product called NP Bacto Balance. Now, NP Bacto Balance is also carbon dosing, but it's carbon dosing that corrects this nitrate-phosphate ratio.
That relation.
So if you have very, very low nitrates and you have phosphates, it will correct this ratio for you. So there's 4 different carbon dosing products, each one for a different application.
Muy bien, amigos de mi Arrecife. Esta ha sido una conversación muy amena, muy agradable con Lu, quien nos ha hablado de productos de Tropic Marine. Ellos tienen mucho más productos, pero estos son de los que pueden llamar bastante la atención. Lu, muchísimas gracias por el tiempo que nos has dado.
Mucho gusto.
Okay.